Hey, soccer fans, welcome back to the Feed the Fire podcast. I am your host, Nick. We have a lot to talk about, not just within Chicago, but in the greater American soccer landscape, as there was a big shakeup with Gregg Berhalter being relieved of his coaching duties. But before we get into all of that juicy USMNT news, I am here with a special guest and friend of the show, with Anthony Koutsias' number one fan. We're going to talk about the Chicago Fire's upcoming match against New York City. Anthony, I want to welcome you to the Feed the Fire podcast. You are actually my first guest on the show outside of our featured guest, John Donovan. So are you up for the challenge of setting a high bar for us here?
Oh, absolutely. I've been a big fan of this podcast for a good minute now. I'm always listening to it in my free time, and I always deeply enjoy it. And I'm honored to be one of the first guests.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you being here and bringing your experience and bringing your fandom to the show, because that's really what I'm doing here, is bringing a little bit of the fan perspective and just having a lot of fun talking about the Fire. But let's learn a little bit about you. Tell us about yourself. How'd you start getting into soccer, to MLS, to Chicago?
All right. Well, it all started pretty much in, I have to say, 2013, when I came here from Mexico because I'm originally from there. Grew up as a Club America fan, if you know them.
Oh
And
yeah,
pretty much.
definitely. No, I don't watch as much Liga MX as I'm sure you do, but obviously with Leagues Cup and with CONCACAF Champions Cup, the exposure is there for sure.
Yeah, I grew up as a Club America fan with my dad. I've always had that thing of following everything he likes. And when I came here, we I found out he liked the Fire, and so I started getting into the Fire around that 2013 region when they made the playoffs. And I'm pretty sure that was the last, the second time I think in the 2010s they made the playoffs. 2013, yeah.
So I think it was 2012, and then they did have a real quick appearance in 2017. Did
Yeah,
not last, though.
17 was heartbreaking.
For sure, man. But go ahead,
Yeah,
keep telling us.
yeah, it was pretty much my dad who helped me get into the Chicago Fire. I always grew up going to games at SeatGeek or Toyota Park, as I still call it. Uh,
Like a
yeah,
good Chicagoan, we can never change the name. It's still
oh
the Sears
yeah,
Tower,
I always tell my dad about that. People say it's SeatGeek now, but it's Toyota Park in my heart.
of course.
Yeah, I loved going to games over there at Toyota Park. I always, especially during the 2017 season, I was actually there when Bastian Schweinsteiger debuted. I actually saw his first ever goal in person, and that's like a core memory. It was It was amazing. I also met him outside this SeatGeek one time, Toyota Park.
That's awesome. How was it meeting him?
Oh, he's a really nice guy. He's super nice. He was one of the best, one of the nicest players I've ever met.
Oh, that's great, man. Love to hear those stories. So you definitely got some Fire credentials behind you for sure. And you have actually been a little influential in the Chicago Fire community lately on social media with the tug in your freaking shirt, as well as doing some jersey designs and things. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's been a pretty crazy couple weeks with this whole tuck in your shirt. The front office has been emailing me left and right. With the Philadelphia game, they invited me field side, and honestly, that was the best game to get to be field side at. Uh, I saw the Hugo Kuipers go in the 92nd minute. It was yeah, I fell to the floor when that happened. I uh I think I may have annoyed some of the people sitting next to me when I fell to my knees when he scored that goal. I think I cried, if I recall.
I mean, that was a pretty emotional game. I
It
mean, I was jumping around my
it
living room here, definitely freaking out, waking up my wife and kids from their slumber that night. So if there's ever a game to cry to this season, I suppose it could be that one, or it could have been the San Jose game last week, man. Do you have any thoughts on that collapse?
it's hard to say what happened. I mean, San Jose are pretty horrible right now, to say the least. Honestly, the Fire could have won that game like 5-0 if they had tried, but I think Klopa's not being there is what caused the Fire to lose 1-0 against historically one of the worst teams I've ever seen.
Oh, for sure. And we talked about that for all our listeners. Go back and check out the last episode of the Feed the Fire podcast. We kind of broke down some of the tactical shifts away from what the Fire usually did with Frank Lopez, shifting Kuipers to almost a second striker and a chance creator rather than the main attacking threat. And I think that had a lot to do with their offensive struggles. But let's turn our attention to the Chicago Fire. Let's take a look at their upcoming opponent, New York City. Let me set the stage a little bit here. New York is currently 5th in the Eastern Conference on 35 points. 11 wins, 9 losses, 2 draws, 33 goals for, 27 goals against. They have a great home record, 8 wins at home, only 3 wins away out of 10. So that does kind of bode well a little bit for the Fire. Additionally, New York City, from a statistical perspective, has pretty decent attacking stats. Their shooting numbers are about, I'd say, top third to top half of the league. They have a better defensive performance as far as goals allowed than I would have thought. But the one thing that the Fire, I think, could take advantage of is that New York City, of all the passes they've attempted this season, only about 10% of them are long balls, are over 30 yards. They love being in the middle of the field. They love being in the attacking third of the field. About 45% of all of their defensive tackles are in the middle third, about 45% in the attacking third, and only about 10% of their tackles, maybe that's a general trend with teams, is you're tackling less in your own third because you're not trying to overcommit. But the fact that it's so lopsided, to me, suggests that New York is playing a much higher line. They're looking to turn you over. They are looking to maintain possession. Anthony, is that what you've seen? Is that what you would expect from this New York City team? A real high line possession kind of a game?
Honestly, I think New York, it's a pretty solid team. I got to give them some praise there. I mean, they're pretty good, but I mean, away they're not as good. I just quickly looked over on at their record right now, and yeah, they're pretty bad away. They've lost to LA Galaxy, Nashville, and Austin away, but they won their last 2 home games. So I mean, Fire, they may have a solid chance if they take advantage of that.
Yeah, and speaking of that Austin game, that was their last game. They are coming off a 2-1 loss in Austin. Actually, a 2-1 come from behind loss. New York City ended up scoring in the 5th minute and then giving up a brace to Gyasi Zardes in first half stoppage time and then in the 69th minute. So giving up the lead and then losing the game. By the way, real quick, Gyasi Zardes, 10th all time in Major League scoring right now. I find that to be incredible, as maligned as he has been. I always liked Gyasi Zardes. Anthony, I don't know how you felt, if you remember watching him a lot with the U.S. or with Columbus or even back when he started his career in L.A., but I always liked him. I always thought in the right system he could be a good striker. So I don't know. Any thoughts on Gyasi Zardes moving into the top 10 all time?
Oh, I'm proud of him. I liked seeing him play at the LA Galaxy. That's where I always saw him. I think I think it was the FIFA 18 video game. He was like on the what's it called? It was like a story mode in FIFA 18, and Sardes appears in it for some reason. And yeah, I've always been fond of him. He's a great player. He's a great player.
Excellent. So now let's take a look at Chicago. What do you expect from Chicago coming into this New York City game? Coming off probably, if you want to go back 6 weeks or so, this has probably been the better part of the Fire season, having that 4-game point streak, dropping a couple games, winning one, but then, heartbreak at San Jose, as bad of a team as they've been. How do you expect the Fire to come out, both from like intensity, tactics? Like, what are you looking for in this match?
I hope they attack a lot more because their San Jose game was not the greatest attacking display I've ever seen. I mean, Haile Selassie was. I think he missed 2 big chances if I recall. One in the early of the game. I just honestly hope they start attacking a lot more because I feel like if they got the what's the word? They got the proper tools to be a great attacking team. They just need to take advantage of it.
For sure. And, they're going to be attacking more than that San Jose game because they only had 1 shot, or I should say 1 shot on goal in that San Jose game. So they can't be worse, I hope. They had 10 total shots, 1 shot on goal. So, yeah, I'm hoping they can get back into a little bit of a better formation, bring a little bit of that intensity that was absolutely missing. But a couple things we have to point out now from the New York side of things. Let's take a look at their lineup and how they could potentially line up against Chicago and where we could run into some problems. So looking at their matchup against Austin, you had Matt Freese in goal. They played a 4-3-3. They had Kevin O'Toole as their left outside back, Strahina Tanasiewicz and Thiago Martins as their center backs. And it's funny, my son was looking constantly at the yellow card numbers because he thought Thiago Martins would have a yellow card suspension by now, but unfortunately not the case for the Fire. And then they've got Tavon Gray out on the right. Tavon Gray, we need to note, is number 9 in Major League Soccer with assists per 90. He is averaging 0.45 assists per 90 minutes. So that is impressive for an outside back and just shows you how much forward that New York City likes to play. So, Anthony, looking at that back line, O'Toole, Tanasiewicz, Thiago, Gray, Matt Freese in goal, do any of those players worry you? Do you think Kuipers and Haile Selassie will have a good matchup with them?
I think Haile Selassie and Clippers they might have a good matchup. They've been on fire recently. If you've noticed, like they've been incredible. I feel like if they get the proper attack going, they could put up quite a bit of goals.
First of all, did you agree with my assessment last week that Kuipers in the second half kind of took a step back and became more of a chance creator? And do you think that'll work against New York City if they try to do that again?
Yeah, I don't agree with what the Fire did with that one. I think they should let Kuipers be the main goal scorer since if you look at his goals, he's very good at scoring from difficult angles and from weird challenges and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like he would feel like he should be the main goal scorer here, and Haile Selassie should be what Kuipers was last game.
Absolutely. And I thought for a while this season that Haile Selassie was starting to become a guy who could look for a pass. Early on in the season, he was a shoot first kind of a player, especially coming in from the wing. But he started finding a little bit of link up play with Kuipers, getting some passes. So hopefully the two of them can work a little bit of magic against New York City. Now, continuing up New York City's lineup, last match they had in their midfield from left to right, Keaton Parks, James Sands, and Andres Perea. Some just well-known MLS names. I think James Sands had even gotten some looks from the U.S. team at some point. So these are guys who know the league, who know MLS, who are going to have a good game regardless of where they play, when they play. So I feel like there's a really big advantage for New York City in the midfield here. And looking at their attacking line, Santi Rodriguez on the left wing, Alonso Martinez as their striker, and Hannes Wolf as their right wing. I do want to mention Alonso Martinez is second in MLS with goals per 90. He is averaging 0.99 goals per 90 on about 4 shots per game. So he's very efficient as an offensive player. Hey, Anthony, let me let you take a wild guess here. Who's the one player ahead of Martinez in MLS goals per 90? Can you take a wild guess?
Kuipers.
Goals per 90? No. Which big name Major League Soccer headlining player? Which $20 million player?
Oh, uh, Messi, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Messi is averaging 1.04 goals per 90. He's the only one ahead of Martinez. And those stats are from the website fbref.com if anyone wants to go check out their advanced stats there. So, yeah, how do you feel about the Chicago Fire's defense lately coming up against a player as efficient as Alonso Martinez?
Well, from what I recall from the San Jose game, I looked at the foot mob stats after the game,
Yeah.
and I saw that the defense actually did pretty good despite letting in a goal. I feel like this defense is somewhat solid. Like I'm looking right here, all the players got above 7 rating, and I feel like they do have a solid defense. The Fire has a solid defense. I'm glad with what they're going right now. Amsberg, I feel like he should get another start.
With Amsberg?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always been high on him, and I know you listen to the show, so you know my opinion. But if you disagree with me, please tell me, because there's a lot of people out there who think he is a USL player, an MLS Next Pro kind of a player. I'm glad to see him back in the starting lineup. Like, what have you seen about Olmsberg that makes you think he should get another start?
Well, obviously that last game, he was playing very well. I feel like he should maybe get another second chance at this game. Maybe maybe become a solidified starter if he can. I've also always been high on Omsberg. You know, he's a great player, great guy. I I really don't see why he should be a USL player. The only defender on the Fire who I think should go back to the USL is Jonathan Dean. But
Okay. Well, I mean, the Jonathan Dean's he's had a rough stretch of games, and I wonder if just the extended time in MLS is finally catching up to him a little bit. But yeah, there's a lot of people who love Jonathan Dean, and a lot of people who would like to see him back in USL, especially after a couple of defensive mistakes in that Philly game. Looking at the Fire defense, I'm very worried about them coming up against New York City. I'm happy they're at home. I think that'll give them a little bit of an advantage, and I think it'll kind of keep New York City a little bit on their back heels, especially if the Fire attack early. But if New York can settle into this game, I'm very worried about our defensive back line being able to keep up with some of these players, keep up with the runners, keep up with their defensive shape. I feel like the Fire are going to be dropping 5 guys in that back line for parts of this game, and I don't like them sitting back and absorbing pressure. So that's just my assessment of it. But that being said, let's get predictions here. So, what do you think the score line will be when the final whistle blows this Saturday?
all right, so I actually had two predictions in mind. Either one, the Fire is gonna win 1-0. That's I find it likely because you know the Fire, they tend to play pretty good against really good teams for some reason, and I feel like they could possibly win 1-0. And my other prediction was NYC possibly winning at least 4-1 or 3-1.
Really, no middle ground there, man. Explain that. Why?
It's because with the Fire, you never really know with the Fire. It's either a small win or a huge loss.
Okay, that's fair. Honestly, I'm the one that's going to be in the middle ground. I'm looking at this as the Fire will have Klopas back on the bench. Not that his tactics will help them, but just having a little bit of that familiarity, being back at home, having a little bit more energy after a week off when the last couple weeks they've had short rest between games. But I'm still nervous about our defense. I'm going to go right in the middle of your result. I think it's a 2-2 draw.
That's fair.
That's where I stand on it.
That seems very likely too.
Yeah, and we'll have to see what the odds are because it's funny. I always, looked at the odds in MLS and thought like the bookkeepers they didn't know soccer yet, but man, they gave San Jose the odds to win that last matchup, and sure enough, it ended up true. So we'll have to check the odds when they put them out. All right, let's take our quick sponsor break here where we recognize our sponsor, our water break here at Feed the Fire. I want to thank Skira Icelandic Spring Water. Icelandic for clear, Skira water comes from a spring in a government-protected nature preserve in Iceland with naturally low mineral content. This isn't your average water. Clearly, pun intended, it's one of the best. And Skira Icelandic Spring Water is available at your local 7-Eleven. And now, turning to the second half of our show, as we mentioned at the opening, the big news around American soccer, Gregg Berhalter has been relieved of his duties. He's been canned. He's been fired, terminated, let go, pink slipped, whatever you want to call it. Berhalter is out. The hashtag has come true. Anthony, what was your reaction when you first saw this headline?
I saw it coming. You know, after that Copa America disaster, I saw it coming. I don't think the U.S. would have kept him. But I mean, it's still a pretty huge news. I've been seeing the reactions over Twitter. Everyone's clearly excited about this. People saying they haven't been this patriotic since the 4th of July. People declaring this a new national holiday. Yeah, people are clearly happy about this. And you know, as a Mexico fan, you know, I was kind of Berhalter in. I'm not gonna lie.
I mean, he did give a few losses to L Tree there, right? That was the other joke, LLL Tree.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, I think it was those Mexico games that really got him that second shot, that second bite at the apple for this 2026 World Cup cycle. It was the fact that he was beating Mexico and the team was being measured in those matches and showing improvement. Now he didn't improve anywhere else, and I think this is why ultimately the decision was made to fire him, is that the team had totally stagnated. They were barely beating CONCACAF opponents anymore. They could not stack up against South American opponents. They couldn't even beat Panama again. So I totally understand. I think it's a little late. Um, we saw them stagnating a couple years ago when they decided to rehire him. So I think it's a little late. Now I have always been, and I know people are going to call me out on it, on what I just said, because I've always been, there's a plan for 2026, follow through with the plan. But the plan was progression, and there was no progression over the last year and a half. So had to be let go. And now you can totally square in on 2026. And even Berhalter said that when he spoke after the news broke. He said like the plan was always for the World Cup, and we weren't following the plan, I guess. So even he thought he was going to be there through the next couple years. So that's big news. I'm excited to see what U.S. Soccer does next. I know people aren't very high on it. I don't know what your faith is in U.S. Soccer. Do you have any candidates in mind? Anyone you'd like to see? Obviously, everyone wants Jurgen Klopp, but what do you think?
Um, I think I think they should go after the guy from LAFC. I forget his name.
Shrundalo?
Yeah, yeah, that's the one everyone on Twitter has been talking about. I feel like he would be great for the U.S. men's national team.
Okay. I mean, he's done a pretty good job with LAFC. Came in after Bob Bradley was let go, and really kind of picked up where they left off, and didn't have too much of a dip in performance. He knows the U.S. He's played for the USMNT, so it's not a bad consideration. I just don't know how his style of play, like he's very used to the club style. I don't know how it would translate to the international game, which was another criticism of Gregg Berhalter. Now let's look at it from the Chicago perspective here. We all know Frank Klopas isn't a long-term solution here. Anthony, would you like Gregg Berhalter as the next coach of the Chicago Fire?
That's a difficult question. Honestly, I would like to see him come to Chicago Fire, but I mean, he has coached in the MLS before, right?
Oh yeah, he was
Or
with Columbus before he went to the U.S.
yeah, and I don't know if he did really good with the Columbus crew. Someone might have to fact check that. Um, but yeah, I would like to see him try to try to have a go at the MLS again. Maybe he can finally be that long term coach that everyone's been wanting.
So if I remember it correctly, his time in Columbus, he didn't win any trophies there, but he did get more out of his team than their talent level. It seemed like they were always outperforming uh, their talent level. And then they went out when he went to the U.S. They brought in Caleb Porter, made some signings, and then Porter helped them win some trophy or win a trophy. But I wouldn't mind Gregg Berhalter in Chicago on the one hand because he is, I think, a better club level coach. I think he could get a lot more from the Chicago team, and the job would be similar to what he did with the U.S. The U.S. was in free fall after not qualifying for the 2018 World Cup, and he kind of brought some stability in, brought in a new group of players, really helped bond them together. I think he could do the same thing for the Chicago Fire team. You got your core guys Kuipers, Gutierrez, Pineda, Chihos, if he is here for another couple of years, Koutsias to build around. You've got 4 or 5 core guys that he could really stabilize the culture with. But on the other side, I mean, we know what the ceiling is. We know the ceiling for Gregg Berhalter is you're going to have a really good MLS team, and that's it. You may not have a trophy-winning MLS team, but they'll be pretty good. So I don't know if that's something that I would want. But as a Chicago Fire fan, we haven't made the playoffs in 7 years. Maybe you're okay with that as a short-term rebuild. I mean, how does that sound to you?
I think that sounds pretty good. Maybe try to do what Columbus did. Get a short term rebuild coach. I mean, they won an MLS cup, 2 MLS cups now that I think about it, and now
All
they
right.
got their long term coach. I think we should follow a route someone like that.
I don't think it's a bad idea, and I hope that the Chicago Fire are considering it, and we'll have to see because even if you think it's a terrible idea, listeners out there, even if you think it's the worst idea to bring Berhalter into Chicago, the Chicago Fire front office would not be doing their jobs if they didn't at least consider it or reach out to him and have the conversation. So that's what I'll say about that. Now we are just about at the end of our show. Looking forward to seeing everyone out at Soldier Field this weekend. Anthony, I'm sure you'll be at the game, right?
Yeah, the Fire invited me out to the game.
Oh, fantastic, man! Are you gonna be field side again?
No, but I'm on the regular seats, but like at the very front row. They actually reached out to me this morning, regarding because the last game I went to fieldside, I didn't get my Kutias autograph, and a whole bunch of people on Twitter were rallying around me getting it. And Dave Baldwin and some of the more front office people were kind enough to reach out to me, and they're currently setting up me getting an autograph post match.
That's fantastic, man. Enjoy that experience. Give Kutias the best from everyone here at Feed the Fire. Thank you for joining me on this episode. Let everyone know where they can follow along with you and maybe see some of your jersey design work that you're doing as well.
People can follow me on, hold on, let me find my Twitter. At Anthony_CF97 on Twitter, and that's where I'm mostly giving my thoughts on the Chicago Fire. And that's also where I post some of my jersey designs that I design in my free time. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to plug from right now.
Well, great, man. I appreciate you being on the show. Thank you for your time, for your thoughts, for your energy. Thank you to all of our viewers and listeners. And as always, fans, let's go Fire.